Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined by Reece and Cam for a very special review. This is, of course, Jaws, released in 1975, and the third film from Steven Spielberg. A film that is going to be very fun to get into because if you are familiar with this channel, you'll know my background with a certain film called Jaws and a lack of speaking about it over the years. But before we get into that, first of all, Reece, how are we tonight? And the same to you, Cam. How is everybody doing?
Very good, thank you for asking.
Fantastic.
I just clocked that.
Well, I'm done.
I've
See
just,
you later, y'all.
I've just clocked as well. I didn't clock Reece's Jaws poster, so we have two people rocking some Jaws merch,
I
which
got
is
two. Yeah.
incredible.
There we go. Two of them. What?
Oh, I see it.
Yeah,
Now I can raise you a Blu-ray, and that's all they'll ever be.
Right.
Recommended by SpyHards themselves.
That's right. Plus, I've got my Jaws statue as well right here.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's always on my
fun.
desk.
I quite like that. Now it's gonna be like a Jaws thing, like who's got the most insane merch. They've got the Bruce Pop. They're doing now really weird poster vinyls for Pop Funkos. It doesn't make any sense. But everybody at home, everybody knows probably this film. This is probably one of the most iconic films of all time. I don't know. There's so many terms we're going to use tonight, but we want to hear your thoughts on Jaws. Please do comment them below. Any thoughts? Everything. Are you scared of the film? Do you love the film? Are you scared of sharks? Do you love sharks? All that kind of stuff. Please do and hit that subscribe button. This is, as I said, the third episode of the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. It's been going to be going on for almost the entire year, and I guess we can say this is his first, not just hit, but this is obviously one of the biggest films ever made, especially just for box office. So, this is going to be a long conversation, one I'm kind of scared and excited for at the same time. And if you are new to the channel, if you know what we do, of course, we're a film channel. We've got a lot of reviews, discussions, watch-alongs, all that kind of stuff. The best way to find out about videos is getting us on social medias, Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. And we have a link to TeePublic in that description below. But as I said, we've got Reece on the channel for the very first time. I'm delighted to get you on. I know we've spoke on Twitter for a very long time. We've seen each other at a few events as well, a few screenings. I'm going to put you on the spot. What I'm asking everybody that's coming on for this channel for not the channel for the first time, for coming to this series for the first time, might be familiar faces or not. I'm just kind of asking everybody, can you remember your first Spielberg film you watched, or perhaps like your memories growing up of them? I'm sort of really curious to hear from people.
Yeah, my Jaws is the first one, to be perfectly honest. My older brother put it on when I was super young, probably way too young to watch a movie like Jaws. The same with Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, two movies I definitely shouldn't have watched, and two that put me in some hard places in my childhood and automatically changed my outlook of the ocean. Jaws, anyway. But yeah, from then, movies like Jurassic Park, all the classic big hits when I was younger, that's kind of what I was into. So yeah, Jaws and Jurassic Park are the two main ones for Spielberg.
I think for me, as soon as you asked that question to Reece, I was like, wait a second, what is the first Spielberg I ever saw? I know I was more than familiar with Jaws because, just in pop culture, you just heard the title. But it was one of two things. I know I watched E.T. for my birthday one year when I was a kid. My parents bought the VHS when it was released. But I also know it would have been, I guess, 1990. My parents rented Always. And I watched like 3/4 of that with them. So it's one or the other. I can't quite. The timeline is muddy. I'm getting old, guys.
It's really fascinating because I think with Spielberg as a filmmaker, it's 5 decades plus now of making films, and I think every single person we bring on this show across the next year is going to have a completely different film. Ironically, I say that the very first episode, two of us were both War of the Worlds in 2005, which was an amazing coincidence. But again, so there are going to be people with different ones. I'm excited to keep learning that. So that's a really big question to get everyone on the spot. Now we're going to get into Jaws a little bit very, very shortly, as we always do on these, but which is going to be a new tradition, reading out the official IMDb synopsis. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we never normally do synopsises, and IMDb, they either have a fantastic synopsis or a terrible one. You don't tend to get in between. You might get a one-liner, you might get like a paragraph. So for Jaws, for anyone unfamiliar with what the film is about, this is the official synopsis now. When a killer shark unleashes chaos on a beach community off Long Island, it's up to a local sheriff, a marine biologist, and an old seafarer to hunt the beast down. again, we all know what we're getting in for at this point in time. And that's where I'm going to kind of kick off. I want to sort of hear from everybody, and this sounds really weird. Reece, you spoke about some of your memories of Jaws seeing it. I'm kind of going to ask us all, because I know obviously behind the scenes we spoke about before live. What's everyone's background with this film and with sharks in real life? I think that might be quite an important conversation piece for tonight.
Yeah, it's for me, I don't, very rarely do I even get in the ocean, and if I do, it's ankles. That is about it. I hear the Jaws theme as soon as I step in the water, and always have. I jumped off a boat on a boat cruise a couple of years back, and the panic that inset was just insane. So I swam for that boat, and I'm a good swimmer. In a swimming pool, I'm a good swimmer, so I was out of there really, really quick, and haven't gone anywhere near since. Even being on a jet ski for me is a pain. I am constantly got that theme in my head. So for me, with Jaws, the theme is 100% the main thing, which has stayed with me for ever since I've seen the movie.
I was a huge shark kid. Like some kids are into dinosaurs or cars or whatever. For me, it was sharks. I was absolutely obsessed at a young age. And I remember I would eat, my mom had seen definitely the first Jaws, and I think the second one maybe on TV or something like that. And for like bedtime stories, I would get her to tell me about shark attack scenes in Jaws movies. It's who knows. I was even volunteering to do shark presentations in my elementary school. So it's a lifelong fascination, but also a terror because I live in Vancouver, BC. There's no sharks in our waters. You're nurse sharks, reef sharks, that kind of thing, but like nothing major, dogfish. But it was always this like just compelling fascination. It continues to this day. I loved going to aquariums and seeing sharks. But I did once experience one in actual life where I was in Australia backpacking, and my friend and I decided to go just to go in snorkeling. And we'd been around, we'd seen sharks, on cliffs. You could oversee like tiger shark breeding areas and things like that. But I'd never been really kind of like face to face with one. And I was like wading into the surf with my friend, and suddenly my friend starts going, he starts pointing, going, "Can you see it? Can you see the fin?" And my first thought was actually not shark. It was like, oh my God, a dolphin. Oh, this is so awesome. I'm going to see a dolphin in Australia. And I said, is it a dolphin? He goes, oh no, it's a shark. And suddenly this fin goes right between the two of us. And I froze, just absolutely froze. And I was like, was that a shark? He goes, yeah, yeah. And I said, well, what? Let's get the hell out of here. And he goes, no, it's fine. Let's keep going. And my friend, props to him, convinced me to go into deeper water. And thank God, the water was actually really murky. So he was like, you know what? This isn't working. We can't snorkel. So let's go back. But I will say, the walk back from that water to the beach was the longest walk of my entire life. I was just waiting for my legs to get, taken out from under me.
I'm going to commend you on your bravery for that.
Stupidity.
Well, you like sharks though, so at least there's a bit more to it. For me, no, not at all. So the background me is I used to do a lot of swimming. Believe it or not, I was thin once when I was younger, and swim was one of the main things to do. And we'd go on holiday to Spain every year, my grandparents' house in Alicante, and it was by some lovely beaches. And I used to love going out into the ocean. I used to, they have the red bubble things. It's kind of like it's the furthest you should really go. I'd like swim out there, or we'd have lilos and stuff like that. And again, we're very lucky. I was going from the age of like 5, 6 every year, so I was really loving the waters. And then there was a year, so I was 10 or 11. I watched Jaws for the first time, and I was traumatized like never before. The opening scene. We're going to get into so many of these scenes, but the opening scene is the one that did it for me, and it still does it now. And I think it's because I used to enjoy going out so far. That was where the fear kicked in for me. Like that could be anyone's legs, and I just remember it like again because it's quite hazy. I can't remember much about the film now. All I can ever remember is the death scenes. And again, this watching it yesterday before we hit record is the second time in my life I've ever seen Jaws. I remember Quint. I don't think anyone can ever forget his ending. Obviously, you've got the kid on the Lilo, and again, I used to like Lilos, and I just remember being so traumatized after watching it. I've not gone in the sea since. I won't go in the sea. Don't mind water parks. If fine, it's salt water. Don't mind, love swimming pools when we're away. But there is no way on earth I'm getting to see. When I go on holidays, I prefer going to cities, not because of Jaws, but just I think the way I prefer like city holidays, going out, exploring new places. And I did have a moment when I went to Skellig Island before Last Jedi came out, and we had to get a boat ride from like the port to Skellig. Now, obviously, there wasn't any sharks, but I compared to King Kong. Like there was like these like giant rocks, just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of birds just sat on waiting. And I was like, if I just got plucked out, like I'd probably get absolutely massacred below me. So I don't have a fear of being on boats yet. But yeah, I've stayed away from Jaws ever since I saw it for the first time. I can't do the beach, and I think sharks terrify me. I can't even watch like joke films like The Meg. Even Pirates of the Caribbean 5, there's ghost sharks, and I was still a bit traumatized. I don't know why. So it's sort of a no-go. I like shudder at footage of them, and every year someone on Facebook gets a near miss, don't they? And there's like, here's a shark getting into a shark cage. I'm like, why would anybody go into them?
I would.
Um, I just I respect you for doing so, but you're live bait, and I can't. If I'm gonna go, I at least want to do it in style, not just being torn apart limb by limb. That's how I've always seen it. But yeah, so that's my background of sort of sharks with Jaws, and I think that kind of makes what's going to make this conversation work for me. This is why I sort of wanted both of you on, because we each have similar but different backgrounds in terms of loving the film or being afraid of sharks, and I think this is where it's going to kick in. So I don't even really know how to. I don't want to move on, Steven Spielberg. I feel like I should keep talking about sharks. I'm just going to scare myself. So let's talk some Steven Spielberg, because this is his. Oh God, is this his most popular film? That's a question within its own right for its own discussion for another time. It's definitely probably in the top 3, but for what this film has done for his career is unparalleled, probably to maybe any other director, bar maybe even George Lucas. Without Jaws, we don't get Steven Spielberg. Without Jaws, we don't get the summer blockbuster. We might not even have as many John Williams scores as we do now. It's crazy to think about the significance of this film upon history. And where I kind of wanted to start with this is if we can kind of, I don't even, because we're still new to doing this Spielberg series, this is the one where we really get to see him come to life. And I'm kind of curious, I suppose, if you actually like, what are your thoughts on his direction? Because for me, again, visiting this for the first time in like 6 years, I feel like I've seen it for the first time. Everyone's seen the gif of him throwing the fish and the shark comes up and catches it. But watching this film yesterday was an experience. But I'm just kind of curious to know what both your thoughts on the direction for this.
There's some fantastic choices throughout. I watched it again the other day, and there's a couple of shots. There's one that goes through the shark mouth, the teeth that go straight through to the sea. It's just unreal. And then the dolly shot after the second kill, the kid on the lilo, it's just absolutely insane. The amount of stuff that supposedly went on behind closed doors and the actual stress that he had to go through to shoot it is pretty nuts. And I definitely think that this is the film that kind of turned him into who he is today. And I think because he had so many problems while shooting it, I think he took so many more risks in his further films. I heard a tidbit about Jurassic Park where there was tornadoes and crazy winds in Hawaii, and he took his cinematographer out during those to get second AD shots. And I think if he didn't have the situation on Jaws, maybe he wouldn't do that. Maybe, obviously, having to survive in deep waters, to use a kind of pun, is kind of what he turned himself into. So I think Jaws is a big reason for why Spielberg is who he is. And direction-wise, he's just brought out nothing but unbelievable blockbusters throughout his career. So is his direction style flashy? Has he got any mainstay kind of stuff that you look at a film and say that's definitely a Spielberg film? I don't think so, but I just think he just knows how to get the best out of a blockbuster for sure.
Yeah, like the stylistic quirks of Spielberg tend to be a little more subtle. There's like thematic stuff, Distant Fathers show up in like so many of his movies. One, I guess, big Jaws hallmark is the flashlight beams cutting through like the fog. You see that in a lot of Spielberg movies, but I think, this movie fell at a very important time for me. It's probably the movie I've watched the most in my life of anything. And I saw this and, Star Wars at very impressionable ages and just revisited them over and over again. And they really taught me about essentially like a great director and the ability to just create a sequence or a scene that just sticks with you. Because, you watch enough movies and you realize like a lot of them just kind of, they just kind of slide off the pan. You don't really remember them very well. And yet Jaws, every single scene in this movie is just so alive. And I know it got blamed a lot, as did Star Wars, for ruining the 70s film period, the gritty character dramas that gave away to the 80s blockbusters. But I think Jaws is actually really interesting because of the fact it blends the two. It has the sorts of, auteur action kind of stuff you would see going forward, blended with a lot of the character drama of the 70s. And it's kind of this perfect movie that could only exist at this one specific time because it would tilt as you get towards the 80s into more of the, kind of a little more of the superficial kind of blockbuster stuff. And it's an interesting Spielberg film because for him, he would kind of change. When you get to things like Jurassic Park, he's not doing the types of character drama he's doing in Jaws anymore. It doesn't feel as naturalistic. This movie is him at a point where you see the influences of more of the naturalistic films of that era. You see it in his previous film, Sugarland Express, very heavily. And he's kind of carrying that into Jaws, and it's going to change. So you really do see a Spielberg that's evolving, but really mastering the two elements, the blockbuster thrills and sort of the naturalistic character drama and comedy.
I mean, I don't know how to recover that. That's some incredible points. What I kind of want to add to that is watching this yesterday. The whole film, it wasn't as not action focused. I hate that term, but kind of what you said there, Cam. That there's a drama in there. If you really look at the events of this film, yes, there's a shark killing people, but the first hour, I just felt on edge the entire time. Like I've always said, Spielberg's one. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock. I'm not familiar with Hitchcock's work as much as the rest. Obviously, he's the master of suspense, but every single time somebody step foot in water until they go on the boat, at any point you think someone's going to go or someone could go. And I think it's incredible the way he shot this film. And again, it's kind of what you said earlier, Reece, as well, that there were so many issues that you just couldn't imagine because of what this film has become and what the final project of this film is. It's almost impossible to believe that there were so many issues. But what those issues did, it crafted, I think, the director that would go on to be on paper commercially the most successful director ever. It's an unfair term. To me, I think he is the best director ever because he can balance dramas and blockbusters. Obviously, that conversation could be hours of of who's the best director ever. It's all opinions. But just seeing this one for somebody's third film. Now, when I saw Duel for the first time a few weeks ago, I loved that. And there was a lot of signs of what's to come. But for a third film entry, I just didn't think we'd get somebody this settled, that you'd get a film this mature yet terrifying, but kind of so appealing at the same time. And I think a lot of it is down to how he reacts to the issues faced on set. It's so easy to look at it in sort of 2022's terms that, oh, there's a damaged shark, we can CG it. And I know that's kind of me shafting on modern films, but it's incredible watching this in this day and age, knowing that you had to do all that in camera back then. And it's not that I'm new to stuff in camera, is the fact that what they're doing. I think this is the first ever film or large film to be shot in the ocean, and that's one of the reasons for so many of its problems. And it's just incredible that he can make a film of this quality. And yeah, it's kind of scary how good this film is. I know that sounds sort of pathetic in saying, right, but does anyone see where I'm sort of coming from with that as well? That it's some directors get a steady build up across their career to building up to, let's say, the Dark Knight of Nolan, right? You have this build up. You've seen some of his really good films. People argue his best one will be early, but when you hit the Dark Knight, that is like, boom, this is a Christopher Nolan film, and the stuff that's come after is what we expect of him. Whereas this was Spielberg's third film, and it was like this happened. And I think that's what amazed me. And I think you get a lot of the auteurs, the ones, your Scorsese, your Lucases, is it the Rat Pack they call them, or that group that were together in the 60s. And it's just amazing seeing how their careers come down. So I guess someone we spoke about on the channel recently, Coppola with The Godfather as well. Again, you could talk about Star Wars. How many of the greatest films of all time have had horrendous productions, issues on productions from across? But I think through that, they then create these directors, they then create these films, and it's a really fascinating way to look at Jaws. Because again, I think because I've sat behind the shadow for so long, if I'm scared of sharks, I won't watch it. I've really missed out on what an incredible film it is.
No, I mean, that's totally accurate. I mean, the issues plaguing him. You think about just think of a top tier director working today and like the issues of Jaws. I mean, this was a shoot that was stretched for months and months and months. There was even crew members who started families with people on the island and just never came back. Like that's a lot of time spent on this island. And he was like in his 20s. That's crazy to think about. And as you said, Hitchcock, the relying on suspense. We can't show the shark and this, mechanical thing that was just a nightmare. And you would never know it to watch the movie. It feels so intentional that you can't imagine anything else. I mean, I was just the other night watching 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea from the 1950s, the Disney film, and it won the Oscar for effects that year and production design. And it has, famously the big squid attack sequence. But you look at the way they shoot that versus what he's doing with Jaws, where he is putting you right in the center of these shark attacks in a way that had never been seen before. It feels visceral. It feels absolutely terrifying. And I don't even know that people were able to comprehend it. It's a little bit, like referencing Hitchcock again, the shower sequence in Psycho. People had never seen anything like that or been kind of in that point of view of being attacked in a shower. And with here, you get the same thing. You get that opening shark attack that you mentioned, George, that was so impactful on you. You've got the killing of the kid, which I actually think is really important because you were saying it feels like anyone could be killed at any point in the movie. It's because I think Alex Kittner dies because you go, like, an 8-year-old kid just died. Like, anything could happen at this point forward. And when you have the one, where Quint gets killed, that's done from his point of view. He's actually shifting now, like actually putting you in the spot of someone being killed by a shark, which is absolutely incredible. And that's the one that had the biggest impact on me as a kid. I desperately wanted to see Jaws. Being so obsessed with sharks, I just desperately wanted to see it. And my parents were kind of like, I don't know if you're quite ready. So one night we were at some friends of ours, and my sister and I snuck because Jaws was on TV, and we turned it on, and it was that part, and we saw Robert Shaw spitting up blood everywhere. We were pale as ghosts. We had to go downstairs. We were a wreck. And it took me like a few years to come back to Jaws. I watched Jaws The Revenge first, actually, all the way through because it was much, much more filed down. So when I saw Jaws, I was finally ready for it. But those attack sequences are like each one like a mini masterpiece in horror filmmaking. And there's nothing, horror is very visceral in the 70s. It's the sort of thing you see in The Exorcist. But what he's doing here in terms of like a real world animal attack sequence, you've never seen anything like this.
Yeah. The thing for me as well is one of the scariest things about sharks is they're coming from below. You can't see where they're coming from, right?
Yeah.
So I think all the deaths, especially before the shark is seen on screen, where I think 3, 4 people are killed before you even see the shark. And that scene where the little kid gets killed on the Lilo, the dog goes missing beforehand.
Yeah.
So you've got a dog and a kid being killed off within the first half an hour of a movie. And it definitely shows that literally anybody can get it at any time. And talking about Hitchcock, the suspense, I just think not being able to see the shark is the most scariest thing. And of course, in the final couple of deaths, you need to see the shark. You need to see who the villain is, even though I still think the mayor's the real villain of the movie. The shark needs to be seen just so they can have something that they're attacking, right? But I think the most impactful deaths in the movie are definitely the ones where you just can't see the shark coming from. And the Lilo attack is why I'm so scared of sharks. That is the moment that done it for me. The stuff on the boat, I can understand that it's a huge shark, the boat's sinking, but just being a stone throw away from your parents on the beach and just knowing that you can go at any time is 100% the most impactful thing in that movie for me.
Yeah, and as well with that scene, I think what sort of really hit me on the rewatch is I know the kids are going to die on the island. I know the dog's not going to come back. Thank God they didn't actually show the dog. But it's the build up of that is when we've got Brody just watching everyone. There's a kid asking his mom to go in the water. There's a couple. There's a guy playing with his dog. And you get this short, maybe it's 30 seconds to a minute, and it's it's almost like a slasher film, isn't it? Like, here's the set list, here's everybody that could go, who's going to go first and how, and that's what that scene is. And it's easy for me to look at that because I know it's coming, but it's the way it's done, and it's the sequence, it's how it's shot, and again, what you both said with the point of view stuff. I mean, you know, we've got some behind the scenes I want to bring up. I don't want to just sit here reading off stuff because this film is known to death, but I've got to say, the three mechanical sharks, the fact that they even made mechanical sharks back then, I think is a credit within itself. No matter the issues they had, when you get to the ending and get to see Bruce in motion, that is terrifying. And again, it's in camera, and that was a real design, and it looks like a real shark, which is, you watch a lot of films, and it's not about technology developing it. It's how you use those mechanisms. I don't think if we saw Bruce for 2 hours, it would be anywhere near as impactful. But the fact we don't, we get the point of view of the shark. It just creates this world of terror. As you said, anybody could go at any point. And I think with sharks as well, for the designs, I mean, I've got a really funny, I had to bring this up. So originally somebody was hired to direct the film, and he got sacked because he kept basically making references to Moby Dick, I think. And they're like, we need somebody that knows the difference between a whale and a shark. That made me laugh. And I don't know if it's funny to anyone else, but it's again, with cinema, there's so many near misses of ifs and buts. It's like sport, anything. You can if and but anything. But there are so many things in play that could have took away what this film would go on to be. And yeah, the mechanical shark stuff I just think is amazing. Now, I haven't seen it, but a play opened in the West End. I think it actually just finished, called The Shark is Broken, and I believe it was a comedy written by the son of Robert Shaw, and he plays Robert Shaw in it. And I got really good reviews, and a lot of people I know saw it. But the fact that something like Jaws can have a play done about the making of Jaws is remarkable. That goes to show that the issues there were on set. Obviously, we'll get into some actors later on as well, but yeah, how Spielberg's able to deal with these issues. I know that he wasn't present at the end of filming, and that's now one of his things, is that he tends not to appear for the last scene or the last day of shooting. He's kind of made it his thing.
The last shot,
And
yeah.
and what I love, and this is more the sort of my background of Star Wars and stuff, is because I'm so familiar with George Lucas and what went wrong in Episode 4, all the issues he had in Episode 4, and how he came out of that with this. To me, it just makes the bond between him and Spielberg more special. I know that's a really random thing to say, but these are, like, to me, the two dudes that not just made Indiana Jones, but to me, these are the pioneers of, I don't want to say modern cinema, that sounds really unfair, but the pioneers of maybe like reshaping cinema. There's probably a better term I can come up with, but without those two, the fundamental difference in filmmaking, Cam, you kind of alluded to the 80s blockbuster, everything that came post sort of Jaws and Star Wars, so much is owed to them. Even aside from that, Lucas, you could write essays on the technological side, ILM, all that sort of stuff. But it's just incredible watching this and seeing those things come into it, because I think if you had some directors that couldn't go because the sharks don't work, how many of them would have thrown in the towel and said, I'm done, I'll leave this project, or it'll get canned or something? But the fact it pushed Spielberg to, let's make it point of view. And we'll get into the soundtrack later on, which is going to be a humongous discussion within itself. But yeah, just Spielberg's direction to this is second to none. And I know that he didn't get an Oscar nomination for directing. We'll bring up some of that towards it. Not that they're the be all and end all, but the fact that it's able to get so many other nominations, and yeah, that'll be a constant thing across the series, is lauding how many incredible films we've got with not enough recognition. But I kind of want to speak about the story and some of the characters. Actually, Reece, you mentioned Mayor Vaughn being the true villain of the film.
Yeah.
I want to cut to you sort of no, because I think I've seen this on Twitter the last couple of years, and we'll have to obviously contextualize it about COVID in a bit, but go through that, because I'm the same boat as you, really, in truth.
Yeah, no, from obviously the COVID stuff, of course, it's pretty apparent that people just don't listen when there's clearly trouble right there. And it's not so much in wanting to keep the beach open, because it's a business. He's the mayor. They're trying to run the location. But it's just certain small scenes, like when he's on the beach and he's trying to force people to go in the water when he clearly knows that 2 people have been killed already. It's just there's small subtle things that he does that just makes me think of him as the villain. And in a lot of horror movies, and I know this movie is debated, is it horror, is it not? Just our experiences alone of sharks just show that it is 100% a horror movie. And I think with horror movies, sometimes it's not the killer more so that is the main antagonist. Sometimes it's someone on the side that's pushing people in that direction, because if they would have just closed the beach off and then try and hunt down the shark, you're talking 3-4 people that died. It's not the same movie, right? So I think the mayor is a big part of the people dying, and especially when the little kid goes up to Brody and slaps him and berates him for his kid dying, and you've just got to stand there and watch, and the mayor's just kind of in the background doing nothing. So for me, I definitely feel like the mayor is one of the most underrated, you could call it, villains in any kind of movie.
And it's so funny too. I mean, he's evil. Just look at his suits. My God. But the character, I've read the novel by Peter Benchley, and in that, the mayor, there's more pressure on him because he has ties to the mob. And so, like, the mob are threatening Brody over the beaches as well. And they excise that. And I think it's actually really interesting to have this character who is just more of a bureaucratic guy who's just kind of spineless. Like, he just is concerned about, the financial well being, probably getting reelected, and he just wants the beaches open. I think it makes the character much more interesting than having external forces pushing him to make stupid decisions. And he spawned, an archetype you would see repeated in all the movies that Jaws, inspired, Piranha and, all these sorts of animal attack movies. That character became so common, and people would often begin to ridicule the trope as like, no one's this stupid. And as you said, I think in COVID, you suddenly go like, no, there are people who will do things like this. Mayor Vaughn, I think, has actually gained levels of humanity over time where we now look at him and go, he's actually a much more interesting character than maybe they would have even looked at him as in 1975.
It's a really good point with him, both what you said, because with him in this, it's kind of he's the antagonist of the film. That you need those deaths, and I think there's that sort of moment when he kind of is reflecting, is like, my kid was in the ocean, but when he delivers on, I didn't sit there thinking he's regretting what he's doing. I feel like he's saying it as a weapon. Yeah, my kid was in there too. So what? That's the kind of vibe I have from him, and he's a really fascinating character. But I think as well, even to Spielberg's other films, the corporate in this suit is a done and dusted for however many decades. It'll always be an archetype of cinema and characters, but it is very much a Spielberg trope that we do get in a lot of his films, but nothing in this capacity of Jaws that people dying on the beach. And as you said, Reece, you understand the pressures that the town needs it to be open to be able to function, and there is some real life stuff in there, but it's as it develops, it gets worse. And the fact is, he doesn't want Quint to be involved. He doesn't want to pay the 10 grand as well, to pay that higher fee. And what it actually does, it builds up to the final act beautifully. If you really think about it, the first hour of the film is a drama between a mayor and oh god, I forgot what Brody's title is.
Chief of police.
Yeah, and it is a drama between those two. They are at one of those throats because somebody's got to come out on top. And what their relationship does and the development does, it leads up to the point where it's okay. Now they're all together. The shark's got to go, and that's where you get the final act on the water, which I think is actually one of the best sort of, not final acts I've ever seen in the film, but the whole sort of the structure of this film is second to none in terms of where you get to. And if, as you said, Reece, if you'd have jumped on the water halfway through, had 3 people trying to kill a shark, you wouldn't care. But because we've seen it terrorize the town, and they've killed a shark, not the shark, and it's all happy days. And then there's another attack on the beach as well, and it's so well done getting up to that. And I think this film needs Mayor Vaughn. And as you said as well, the COVID stuff, there's no denying. I think that did become quite a popular meme over the years, and it is crazy to say that that. I'd imagine the first person that tweeted during COVID just sort of laughed, and then it became a reality that it was this, open the doors and whatnot. Obviously, we hope we're at a much later stage of that now. But even off our own government, without getting political, don't party, but we're all doing it. Anyway, change the subject from that. Let's talk some more of the characters, because I mentioned Brody, played by Roy Schneider. I absolutely love the characters in this film, just as a consensus before I get into some of them. Again, because I'm so fixated and my knowledge is on the shark attacks and who dies, not the other stuff. It was amazing to view this, to see these completely contrasting characters. By the time you get to find band together to take down the shark, and I think that's truly what makes this film. It isn't just the shark; it's about the people and how they've reached the points they have done. And I won't say Brody's my favorite in it. I'll get to mine later on. But I think it's a very subtle performance, but one that you can watch him and you understand he's got the weight of a whole town on his shoulders. He knows what he's got to do, and he's not getting that spot. I think it's a very, I don't want to say underrated performance, because all three of these performances are legendary in their own rights now. Obviously, we're approaching like 45 years plus, but I was kind of surprised at how good the performances are. Maybe that makes me sound slightly naive.
No, I agree. I definitely, after watching it again a couple of days ago, I think because of how visceral it is and how iconic it is, you sometimes forget about the performances. And I think the scene when they're on the boat and they're kind of bonding over battle scars and stuff is when all three characters kind of get their chance to shine. And yeah, I think the acting throughout from everyone involved is spectacular, to be perfectly honest.
And it kind of goes back to my point I was raising earlier, where it feels like Spielberg's still one foot in that naturalistic 70s sort of vibe. Like the characters in Jaws feel very relatable and real. And, I love Jurassic Park a lot. The characters in that feel like movie characters. They don't feel as human as the characters in Jaws. And just all of them are decent people who are stuck in a situation that they are doing the best they can to navigate. Even Quint, a character who could be portrayed as a total demon in a different movie, is someone who is obviously rough around the edges, is probably not the most jovial of guys to be around, but is trying to help out. Like he's trying to do what he can do to stop, solve this problem. And the way these characters interact, there's not a single bad combo in this movie. There's not a single pair of characters you put together in this movie who you go, well, this scene's kind of dead. Even scenes, Roy Scheider and Lorraine Gary as his wife. I am as interested in watching their dynamic as I am the flashier dynamics in the movie. And, she doesn't get shouted out as much because of when you've got your main three and then the really showy Murray Hamilton in the, anchor jackets and everything. She kind of fades into the background of people's sort of memories of the movie. But I think she's fantastic, and scenes just talking to him about, his stress and like watching him, sit with his child and, they imitate each other back and forth. Like it feels like real individuals. And I think that is a reason that it continues to work so well, is because I think when people watch movies with movie characters, there's a certain amount of distance they can take where they may still love the movie, but it doesn't have the emotional hold over them. Whereas I think Jaws really pulls them in emotionally.
No, and that's really well said. And I think where you kind of come for these being real characters as well, I think that's where you feel that in so many films we form attachments to the characters that do feel the most human of them all. Especially when you do get nowadays, I guess so you get like blockbusters, you get the odd character that jumps up and they feel very real and they always stand up for the reason they feel like real characters, or the real character is the introductory character we align with and they're chucked in with the caricatures of X, Y, and Z. But with this, everybody in this just appears like they're in this situation. And sometimes with films, less is more. How many modern films, if someone was hunting down a shark, would you get 3 people? You'd get 30 people on 10 boats, which they do in this, to sort of in a very comedic scene, which probably, I don't know if it's intended to be comedy when they're all going off on the adventure. Someone lobs a grenade in the sea. That's probably as American as you're going to get looking at it in this day and age. But the characters make this film, and Reece, you mentioned the scene of them at the table. I mean, we'll get to Quint shortly, but bloody hell, I was not expecting that yesterday. I was just expecting, they're talking, we're going to get a shark just come through and annihilate them. But no, it just carried on, and it's such a delicate, I think, film in that way in which you're able to bring in these characters and they're almost not spoken about because of the success of the other things. And the film can't be successful without these. And I kind of want to talk about Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss. Now, I've seen very few Richard Dreyfuss films, if I'm being completely honest. Now, what I have seen is the film that got him onto this, which was American Graffiti, recommended by George Lucas as well to be in this. I think Spielberg over the years has said that he kind of wrote Hooper as himself, but like I'm trying to think of the term, like a not opposite, but when it's sort of like dialed up to 100. And I think a lot of directors have done that in the past, where they've picked out characters. They say this is almost like a fictional version of me with a bit of a twist. I'm trying to think. There's a really obvious director, but I'm struggling to remember it. People always mock Nolan films because the actors always wear suits with the same haircut, all that. Look at Rob Pattinson in Tenet and Leo in Inception. You can do way more than that. And I kind of love that stuff about films, but I was surprised with him because my memories are hazy, is that he survived. Now I know originally he wasn't meant to survive. I don't know if that's in the book, or if it was if the book as the book as well. Okay,
Well,
but
in the book, he does die, and he's also having an affair with Brody's wife throughout the movie. Like
oh,
the Hooper of the book is actually nowhere near as likable or fun.
and that's a good. Can I ask you this? Sorry, this is sort of off topic. So
Hmm.
Spielberg, in an interview I watched, he said that the they didn't particularly like the characters from the book, and that's the one thing he was trying to change. As someone that's read the book, is that kind of bang on that he says they're all quite unlikable, and he wanted to sort of switch that up.
It
Is that
Yeah, the characters are definitely more flawed. It's more of a pessimistic view, I think, of the character. Spielberg is an optimist. He's a humanist, and he does like to really have characters that feel a little more aspirational. So there's not a lot from the book you would take. I mean, plot points, it does follow reasonably closely. You know, there's some diversions, but for example, like when they go out in the boat at the end, the journey is in the book, they keep coming back like to shore every night. So it's like a 3 or 4 day back and forth kind of trip. So I think that's a smart choice. But yeah, the characters, I would say when you read the book, you're reading it more for the overall scenario and just kind of the thriller aspects versus anything regarding the characters.
it's interesting, and I think that's where Hooper comes into for me is that he feels. You mentioned optimist. Every time he appears on screen, he feels like a kid that's just come out of uni that's really excited to be there. You know, that sort of like first like adult job, even though it's not really a job, it's trying to stop a shark killing people. I thought he was quite great in it, and that you very much got, you know, Brody at the forefront, Quint the old guard, and Hooper the new guard, and it's that dynamic that the three of them have with each other that really sort of clicks and makes it work. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, and I'm not going to lie, I've spent the last 15 years thinking that there was only two people on the boat, so that really goes to show how little I've known about this film until yesterday.
He's really good in it. I always thought he was gonna be one of the people that were gonna die, especially when they kept hinting at that shark cage all the time. And obviously with the shark battering the cage down when he's in the ocean, that's kind of how I expected it to go, but with one more death to go with it. But no, I haven't read the book myself, but it sounds from what you've said so far about the book that it's probably taken some good changes in the movie to make it what it was. Um, but no, his character is superb again, and I think all the characters are completely different, but they're all the same in a way. So I think that's why it works so well with Hooper.
And there's really interesting contrasts because like Hooper is kind of the comedy relief. You know, he's the rich kid. So in some ways he's an outsider, but then when you get that dynamic of the three of them on the boat, it's Hooper and Quint are the two that they may drive each other crazy, but they have more in common. They both, you know, are kind of used to being on the sea. They both also view the shark as an animal, which is something Brody doesn't. Brody is the only one who's viewing it as essentially a horror character, like a nightmare come to life. And I think that's the reason Brody's ultimately successful is he's the only one that understands the nature of what this shark even is, whereas the two of them look at it either scientifically or as, you know, something to be hunted and killed.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Quint as well because Quint's my favorite character of this film. It's always those like I mean he literally is a veteran in this that grizzly character, the one that comes in maybe not for the final act, but without getting to sort of old school like fairy tale like storytelling linear stuff. He's like the guide, and you know he's going to go. You know he's not going to survive this film. The man that wants 10k for killing the shark, you know, is dead meat. Obviously, you know I've had an image scarred in my head for 15 years of how he dies. But watching it again, I absolutely was taken away by his. I think it's the best performance of the film purely because of the monologue with the USS Indianapolis. Now, I had to double check after because when they started talking, if you think okay, fiction, I was like, hold on, I was like, I've heard of this story before at some point over the years, and I don't like sharks, so I don't. I was trying to figure out when I might have learnt about the Indianapolis. It might have been during history at school or something, and what I loved about the monologue is just not the words he says that's sort of pathetic, but the way the scene is shot, it kind of just steadily, quietly starts to zoom in on him throughout, and it's one of these really subtle moments that you know you can feel the atmosphere in the room when he's telling that story about where they've led to this, and you're there. You know, he's speaking about oh the you just see the black eyes, and I'm there like you're just describing my nightmares, and that scene is without a shadow of the doubt one of the best scenes of the film, if not the best scene of the film, if I'm being honest. But what it did, it was able just to create so much character on a monologue. You know, the trope of it's just the kind of the crazy old dudes that's nearby that's going to help us. It just ended all of that, and you realize that this is someone with PTSD. There's a reason why he's going around hunting sharks. He has suffered for decades at this point, and that was what was incredible to me. And as well, the fact that Robert Shaw plays him as well. Now, the main thing I've seen Robert Shaw from over the years has always been from Russia with Love. I think a lot of people might obviously say that as well. Completely different character. I couldn't see Red Grant, fighting a shark. Maybe he'd give it a go, but not in the way Quint does. And I just thought his performance in this completely blew my mind. And it's kind of, I felt a bit bad. I was like, I feel like I should go and seek some more Robert Shaw films because I've really not seen many, if any. And obviously, he died very soon after this film came out. And what's kind of not necessarily sad with this, but obviously behind the scenes of this film, there wasn't just issues of sharks. Spielberg obviously had Roy Schneider and Robert Shaw didn't get along either. There was a lot of issues between those two, sort of one-upmanship on set. And I think the story I read with Robert Shaw is that he messed up the take so bad for the monologue. The next day he came to set, and he did it on his first go. He had permission from Spielberg, and yeah, that scene just blew me away from anything.
That is not only the best scene in the film, it's one of the best scenes of all time. I think if you're talking about monologues and proper character building, there's not many better monologues than that. And Robert Shaw is just fantastic in the film, but that scene just takes his performance to a completely different level, and it just changes the whole dynamic of the film. That's the switch then, which leads you into the final act of the movie. And it's just a perfect crescendo into that final scene. Obviously, the scene where he dies. And when I first watched the film, I was super young, so looking at stuff like that and characters' demise, that was not something I was looking at all. It was more just look at the flash, look at the sharks and stuff like that. But in my later years, having watched the film more times, you kind of notice smaller things that he's doing throughout the movie. And his introduction, the scene when he's scratching the board, is just a fantastic introduction to the character and who he is. And yeah, no, I agree. I think it's the best performance in the movie, the best scene, and just one of the best scenes of all time, in my opinion.
It's an absolute crime he didn't get a supporting actor nomination that year at the Oscars. I just think that's just head scratching. And I'm sure it was a little bit of a dismissal of, well, this is just a blockbuster movie. But when you look at the other roles, nominated that year, there's great performances, but very few have stood the test of time the way his has. And like that speech, Robert Shaw did co-write that speech. There was, I think, 4 people worked on it. Carl Gottlieb, the on-set screenwriter of Jaws. I know that John Milius, who would go on and do like Conan the Barbarian, had a hand in it, and there was someone else whose name I'm forgetting, so apologies to them. But it was something that was clearly they knew was incredibly important, and something that is also, as you said, like it adds humanity to a character who could easily just be the surly old sea dog character, just setting them up for the death scene at the finale. But like a scene like this does establish the psychological makeup of this character. And also then when you see his death and it's shot from his point of view, you are witnessing his greatest fear come to life. So you are now projecting onto this a level of horror that even the visceral visuals of it isn't going to be able to communicate fully.
It's the scene itself, the death, and I think, as you said, he's watching the horror unfold. That we see the shark's eyes, and the way its jaws are moving, it's like just snapping, isn't it? Like a sort of turtle or something, and it's just terrifying to watch. And we know what's going to happen the moment that boat starts to sort of, okay, he's a goner here. It's going to be his time to go. He's had this. If you really boil down to what you say, Cam, he's had this wonderful speech, and everything came true about it the next morning, literally for him. And I think that's what kind of startles me with his death. And it's the really quick cut of the blood popping out the mouth, but it's that slow dive. He's like kicking his feet, isn't he, against the shark, trying to avoid going into the mouth. And it's just horrifying to watch. And I think going back to that sort of question, is it horror? The film, to me, this film's always been horror, not just because I'm scared of it, but the way in which they can just create terror off the click of a finger like that. Just that moment sliding down, that's when you know it's getting off. As I said, it's what they're able to do with the shots after, And it's when he does do the coughing thing, it's like a click, isn't it, after he's dead, and then you're with somebody else. There's no time to see a shark, drag him away like you would in modern day, swim around with him. It is just done and dusted, moved on to the next moment. And I think that's what sort of has that for him. And it's a kind of not fit. I mean, it is a fitting end, right? The shark hunter is the one that is likely to get killed by the shark. It's kind of fitting. It'd be weird if he was the one that survived. But even off like the design of the character with the beard, the clothing, all that kind of stuff, I think just adds to him as the film goes on. I think that's the sort of takeaway with him, is that you've got the young character of Hooper, you've got Brody, middle-aged, and Quint, the older veteran, but everything about their appearance is matching what we're seeing on screen. And yeah, his death is I'm sure there are millions of children who have been terrorized by seeing that at a young age. But at the end of the day, you've got to give them credit to it for showing it, right? I know that's a really simple thing to say, but that's the kind of thing where I guess back then, because this kind of was the prelude to the blockbuster, nowadays that scene's not ever going to get put in a blockbuster.
No, not at that rating. Not with a PG
No,
rating.
yeah,
And also,
yeah.
I should add, I should have mentioned that that's not how he dies in the book. In the book,
isn't
it
it?
is more no. In the book, it's more of an Ahab thing where they actually drown the shark. It's not blown up in the book, and he gets his leg through a harpoon tied around his leg, and he gets dragged down with the shark and drowns. So, like, that was a very conscious choice on the screenwriters and Spielberg to introduce the Indianapolis element, and then also to give him such a visceral death scene.
I think that scene, because all the other scenes kind of happen off screen, you don't actually see the shark. I think is so much more impactful, and from it being from his point of view, it is so visceral, and it just has such an effect because it is that one death that you see the shark actually doing what it does. And again, like you mentioned, it's not kind of biting him and dragging him around and causing a scene for dramatic effect. It just works to an absolute T.
Mhm.
No, absolutely. And speaking of the shark, I know this is a polite segue to talk about maybe one of the most iconic two notes in musical history. Is it go that far? Let's talk John Williams. Let's talk Steven Spielberg. Um, the greatest director composer combo ever. I don't think it'll ever get topped. I'll maintain that forever. Doesn't matter who else I like. That is a duo that's just impossible to consider anything else. And what kind of surprised me and Tate spoke about in the Sugarland Express video last week, was that I didn't realize that that was a John Williams score until I was watching it that day. I was like, oh, I thought it sort of all happened with Jaws. And I mean, it's an understatement to say he won the Oscar for this. I'm just going to talk about, if I'm being blunt, not even the score, the theme. It is the most recognizable theme in cinema. I think that's fair to say. I think anyone of any age can probably tell you that is the theme to Jaws. And I think it is one of the greatest ever cinematic techniques to create suspense. Okay, the shark's not working. Let's do point of view.
100%.
Let's create a song to put on with point of view. So we all know it's coming still. We're gonna know it's coming, but the kid won't. And it is, oh, it scares me. I get uncomfortable listening to it. I still do. It doesn't matter what age. I feel really bad because when we used to have dogs, I used to, like, one of my dogs was a bit scared either. So I used to chase around, listen to the Jaws theme. And I've got loads of old videos when I was younger, just like me running around with the Jaws theme, like just running after her. And I was like, God, that is quite terrifying when you really drill it down, that theme. And John Williams, yeah. If anyone else wants to speak about the theme, because I'm just going to keep saying how great it is.
It's iconic is the main word for it, isn't it? I think when you're talking about going into water, I've been in swimming pools, heard that theme, and started panicking. And that's how bad it is. And anytime I go into the sea, put my feet in, I automatically hear that theme. And it just worked so well in the movie. Like we said, you don't see the shark for 50 minutes to an hour of the movie, but you know he's there because that theme keeps on coming. And all those underwater shots with the theme on top of it are just so good. And I agree. I think it's probably the most iconic score of all time. Debatable, that and Star Wars, but I think most people would probably go for Jaws and just the effect that it has anytime you're in water. I think even if you're not scared of sharks, you're still going to have that theme kind of coming onto your head when you're in water.
The only thing that I think of when I think of another score that is as widely recognized would be the psycho sting of like the, you know, re kind of
Mhm.
stabbing sound, which I think people also know even if they haven't seen Psycho. It's just kind of part of the pop culture memory. Um, but it's that simplicity of both of them. It's just a sense of it's just like a note played that has this driving momentum to it, and it speaks to kind of our nightmares. And you see the way that it's influenced even like the Batman and the theme they use for that character in the movie recently, where it is just this very simple note of this unstoppable force. And I mean, one of the things I think is really interesting with the score by John Williams too is the way he uses it. First of all, just to cover the problems they had with the production, these mechanical sharks that weren't working. It speaks for the shark at all times, so the shark's always there, even if you're not seeing it. And I remember I think one of the studio execs actually wanted to train a real great white shark to star in the
Yes.
movie,
Yeah.
which would have been amazing. I would have loved to have seen footage of that of that act. But one thing that's interesting is when you get further into the movie and you have this sort of John Williams more adventure theme, and the way that it's this kind of high spirited, the three guys are on an adventure, but that the central Jaws theme just keeps working its way into it. I've always kind of interpreted it as to these three guys, they're having an adventure and they don't realize they're in a horror movie. And the horror movie keeps sneaking back in and kind of dragging them back to the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I noticed that it's that I hate using the John Williams type music cue, isn't it? But adventure's the best time. I think John Williams, you know, horror, adventure, everything. He has a way to do a sort of bring up the mood. He can do it, and I think because he's so. I don't want to use the word classical, but he has this presence in cinema where I think you can tell it's a John Williams score inside maybe 10 seconds of it starting. Harry Potter, Jurassic Park, Jaws, Saving Private Ryan, nameless. They can all go on. Not just Steven Spielberg films. They're going to add so many other incredible ones. But you're right. You know, we've had this terror on the beach for so many minutes. The film, the opening few acts, and then we're going to get them going from the journey to get him, and it's so upbeat. I was like, this is really nice. They're all going to get massacred, and it's the way he's able just to do it so simply. And I don't think it's as simple as it looks. I think because John Williams at a caliber of composer that's never been reached, if I'm being honest, he is able to make these extremely challenging moments simple. And I think because he has this devotion, he just has a way at scoring music. It's just really as simple. I don't think there's anybody else like him. And with this film, he's just able to bring it to another level. And as you said, Cam, he can then just chuck in the horror. He can work and he can slowly bring it back. And it's the key moments of the film is, when they're scoring this, I'm sure there's some probably incredible books maybe on the score, let alone the film. You can imagine him thinking, I'm going to slowly ease people in, because at this point in time, everyone knows those two notes are the Jaws, the shark is nearby or whatnot. And it is so paramount that has to be slowly worked in for when it does need to come up. And that's what's always fascinating when you listen to the score is the gap between those notes. Sometimes it will, obviously the closer the shark gets, the quicker the tempo goes. Of course it does, but there's some hefty gaps between playing them. And it creates this sort of sound for me personally watching at home. It's like, did I hear the shark theme? Like, is the shark coming? And I think when it's able to question you as a viewer through a score, let alone visuals, that's when you get into the next level. Especially when the ending of the film, it is an act on open water, which is incredible by itself. I mean, it looks stunning. I think the story is that they didn't want any shots of land so people wouldn't think they can just get back. It really does look like they're out there. Obviously, towards the end, until we get to obviously we can see something on the horizon. But yeah, the score is just incredible, and is rightly remembered for being so.
Yeah, I think it's going to go down as one of the all-time greats. Just the build-up of tension that is caused through them two notes is just absolutely insane. And like you said, you just constantly get reminded of the shark throughout the movie because of the score. And the way he kind of implements it throughout the whole movie with the different tempos to show the threat of the shark is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I kind of want to add something as well that when I was doing a bit of looking, Spielberg says the film wouldn't be half as successful without the score. John
No,
Williams says this really kicks out his career, and I think it's the same, isn't it? It's that he was, as you said, Cam, he's able to create something that's kept this film working. That there's issues with the sharks, they're going to work around it, and this is how you work around something like that. And it's just, I don't think any film has any right. Well, it's a bit unfair to say no film has any right to be saved, but for what this did is fundamentally, you think of some films where there's trouble. I think of Dark Phoenix on the spot. Terrible film, fantastic score, but a score can't elevate a film. I can only imagine what it was probably like for the execs thinking they have a train wreck on their hands. It's like what 100+ days over schedule, and then it's going to come out the way it has, score included, film included. I mean, it's shot beautifully. It's unfair to compare it to X-Men. So if anyone thought I was comparing them, I'm really not trying to. But yeah, and just with John Williams as well, like he's turned 90 recently. He's scoring the new Spielberg film coming out this year. He's scoring Indiana Jones 5 for next year. He's done, to me, I think, no matter what people's thoughts are on that sequel trilogy, I think he was by country mile one of the best things about that trilogy. As he's composing a theme for the new Obi-Wan series. He's composed a theme for Star Wars, and he's still doing this at the age of 90 years old, and the quality hasn't dropped. He's
No.
still at the top of his game, and I think that's what is incredible. As a fan of his, it's just unbelievable, and that's why what kind of really threw me off guard of Jaws is that when I was a bit younger and sort of getting to film, I was like, oh, not something horrible. You'd assume that they may have passed on when you're quite young. You think this is an old film. And he wasn't like a young composer when he scored. He was in his mid-40s. I mean, that's not old. I'm not saying that. But for a big breakthrough, I know he's already won Oscar. He's scored stuff. But nowadays, you get some composers who are getting in there in their 20s, early 20s, late 20s. I think Ludwig Göransson's really young when he was starting to break through, who's, I think, going to be going to be a classic. And it's just incredible that John was in his mid-40s and we've had this incredible career that's come after this relationship with not just this director but so many franchises. I'm going to keep harping at John Williams. I know it's going to be like, this retrospective series basically doubles up for John Williams by a couple of films, which is amazing. But this is the first mega one that John Williams did for Spielberg. So yeah, I'm going to politely hand over to anyone that wants to speak about John Williams before I run out of words.
So with John Williams, there's people that are good at their job, right? There's very good people at scoring movies, and there are just people that are just born to do things. Messi was born to play football, right? And John Williams was just born to score movies. Some of the scores he's done are just absolutely unbelievable, and you can tell a John Williams score straight away, but they're not the same. They're completely different, but they're just so cinematic, and the way you can just influence a movie it is pretty nuts, to be perfectly honest. And like you said, if the movie was terrible and the score was amazing, it wouldn't turn it into a masterpiece, right? But you add that music on top of what the film is, and he's just turned some very good movies into some of the best movies ever made. And like you said, the fact he's still doing it in his 90s and to the rate that he's doing it and the level that he's doing it is just pretty insane. He was 100% born to do what he's doing.
I mean, I definitely started loving listening to film scores because of John Williams. It was probably more so Star Wars, buying the scores to those when I was a kid, but it just led me into so many of his other works as Indiana Jones and of course Jaws, and that just led me into other things, Danny Elfman and all these other great composers. But one thing about the Jaws score too is it is aged incredibly well. I have seen this movie many times, not just by myself, or with friends or whatever in my house, but also I've gone to many screenings, in theaters. I've seen it outside by the beach, projected outdoors. And you see people tensing up when that score kicks in, especially towards the end of the movie. And it just shows like the power of that music and how it just really has impact that has not lost a step at all. And one of the big complaints you hear nowadays is that scores often sound like wallpaper, which is really true. Like you can hum John Williams scores regardless of the movie, whereas a lot of composers now, and I don't blame the composers. I think it's what the demand is of the job now. I think filmmakers are asking them to compose these quote unquote atmospheric scores that are there to kind of accentuate the movie but not draw attention to themselves. And I do think scores like this stick with people. Like they have a genuine impact that adds to the enduring life of the movie. And I will just throw in another little bit of a recommendation. John Williams' score for Jaws 2 is actually really good.
So that goes to a great score can't make a bad movie great, but a great score can make a great movie a masterpiece.
Hmm.
And I think as well, you mentioned that another thing. Going to bring up Star Wars again. Ryan Johnson released a score-only version of The Last Jedi. Now, I've never seen this, and I do want to at some point. I believe the whole film is muted of dialogue. I don't know if that includes sound effects, but it is just so you can listen and watch John Williams' score on a film. I think that is an incredible idea. I would be, again, it's my fault I've not seen it, but I'd be so curious to see that for other films because it just shows the power that somebody in that can be. But it's a sign of respect to the composer too, that people can go out and watch a version of a film just to listen to that score. So I'm a big Ryan Johnson fan, so I think that's one of his most commendable things to date. Yeah, I mean, the score's not going to be anything to speak of, but we're gonna sort of move on to the next segment. Now, this is sort of like the legacy of a film. So we've been doing this each. So some of these, Spielberg's first film, his first art film. Jaws is the first one where the bullet points are to kick in. So I hope I'm not going to read it off like a wiki article, but I've put down the impact upon the release of this of audiences at the time. Now, the old phrase I believe is that this is like the summer where nobody went to the sea or something. Like this film was so big, everyone was scared to go in the ocean that summer. Now I wasn't around then, but I've not been in the ocean since seeing the film 16 years ago. So I can understand that, but I would be so curious. One of the things, I hate the whole if you had a time machine sort of nonsense, but I've always been curious about the old school cinemas, when there weren't multiplexes, how films like Star Wars, people queue around the block, seeing like films emerge, be these humongous cultural phenomenons would have been incredible back then. And, Jaws, they say, is the original blockbuster. My old film lecture had an incredible anecdote where it's kind of like Godfather knocked on the door, Jaws kicked it down, Star Wars barged through. He always described them three as the creation of the blockbuster, which I've always stuck by. And with this, I can just see why it's such a big hit that, you didn't have blockbusters back then. The summer releases where you send the dead films, which is really ironic because nowadays the dead films used to kind of be spring, but now there are so many films coming out a year now where you can get like one or two tentpoles in spring. It's quite a protected, secluded release date. But the summer movie blockbuster, however you want to describe it, call it the season, a lot of it is down to this. And you can see why this film is obviously set throughout summer as well. It would make sense for this to come out in summer. That it was slated for November. I couldn't imagine watching a film like this in November. It'd be really weird timing. That being said, some films do work in different times here, but I'm just like kind of curious that, if you two, are you familiar, well, not familiar with how big this one is, that sort of stupid question, but can you see why this film it has the reaction and the reception it does amongst not just film fans or sort of areas demographics, but as a culture?
100%. I think someone could watch this movie for the first time today and you could see the effect that it would have. It was the first kind of movie of its kind, and that kind of shark aspect, the sea aspect, it's an enemy that you don't really know exists, and sharks are probably not going to go anywhere near you if you're in the ocean, but it's just that whole taken away such a big part of the culture in certain places. Obviously in England we don't have too many nice beaches and the weather's never too nice to be going in, but I would assume in places like Australia, in America, California and stuff like that, that it would have just, people just would not have been going in the ocean because it's such a fresh thing on your mind. And the fact we didn't have the internet back then, it was solely word of mouth and people are just going out of their way to watch this movie, and the fact that people are just forcing other people to watch it and just putting fear in people for years to come is pretty insane. But I can 100% see why the movie done well in its time, and I can see why it's still such a big movie today.
It really does speak to a more innocent time, though, because I remember, there was the stories about people being scared to take showers after Psycho, people blacking out, in terror during The Exorcist. And this feels kind of like the next step of people being terrified to go into the ocean. So much so that when they put out the second one, it's the just when you thought it was safe to go into the water tagline. Like it really was playing with that sort of public fear in a fun way. And I don't know that we've had anything like that since. And it was just, it speaks to the era, of course, but I think you tend to find that a lot of the times studios are cynical and say just prepackaged things, audiences will show up, and it will work a lot of the time. But when you can present them with something that feels new and innovative, but wrapped in a story they can emotionally connect to, the response is going to be just through the roof. And I think Jaws really delivered that and was kind of handing Hollywood kind of a picture of what a mass entertainment could be, and only few people have understood it in the years since. Spielberg himself has always had a lot of respect for our audiences. I think James Cameron does. I think Christopher Nolan does when it comes to making like big blockbuster entertainments. But it is that respect for the audience and the fact that Jaws has state of the art effects in it. It had a shark that scared the hell out of people, but it's at the end of the day, the characters and the story that pull them in.
Yeah, and I can see that as well. It's really well things spoke about, and it's just amazing sort of sitting here 45 plus years later. Obviously, we're not going to be the only people ever speaking about this film. Everyone speaks about it on a regular occurrence. Cam, you said you go to screenings for it. Just seeing that it's still a thing, and that sounds really dumb saying things. Sorry, I keep making these awful things. I feel so new to Jaws still. I've been really like not on edge today, but I'm in this really weird state of mind where like I'm still processing a film a day later. But I've got stories from my dad where he'll speak about going to the cinema when he was a teenager watching Jaws, and it's kind of like for me, like yeah, I definitely wasn't gonna do it, but it's a generational film, and I think when the next generations keep coming through, Jaws is going to be one of those films that people do go to, do speak about, and people will at some point see. And I think the film is so iconic in its own right due to its simplicity. A film about shark attacks, yes, there's a lot more to it than that, but the core of it, trying to sell it to somebody, you're not trying to sell a franchise unless you really want to go there and get them into Jaws 3D and all the others. But it is like an experience to see this film. And I think that's one of the reasons it's had this longevity, that sharks aren't going to go away. Asterisk, I think they might be endangered to a point, but the concept of a shark in the sea potentially killing somebody is not going to go away. And I think that's why this film will always stay relevant to our time. And even if it's not a shark, there are other creatures that will kill you in the sea. It wouldn't really look as good if there's a film called Killer Whale. There probably has been one called that before.
It's called
probably loads of
Orca.
others. Orca. We've got Piranha, which I think I saw one of the Piranha films. It might have been the remake a couple of years ago.
The original was all right.
Yeah.
Did James Cameron do a Piranha film?
Yeah.
Well, sort of.
Involved in one, producing, I believe.
Joe Dante directed the original Piranha in like 78. James Cameron, depending on the stories you hear, directed like 3 or 4 days of Piranha 2, but his name is all over it. Like if you buy the DVD, it's James Cameron directed, and they've even made the DVD cover art look like the movie Avatar.
Oh god. Well, at least we got a new James Cameron film this year with some secret being shot in Sea Creatures Avatar 2. Random tease there. What I want to speak about is box office. I love talking box office stuff. I get really sad for numbers, but I just want to quickly say, without getting into it too much, this obviously became the highest grossing film of all time for a couple of years. So Star Wars came along, and then Spielberg would then go on to break Star Wars' record of E.T. in 1982. But I really want to talk about is Oscars. I mean, all these videos being pre-recorded at the moment. So the last time we did a video was before the real life Oscars took place. I'm not going to comment on events from that. Obviously, Spielberg didn't win any, so I keep saying on the other videos, oh, there's a chance he might have won by the time he gets this. He didn't, but the fact that this was only nominated for 4, not that it means all much in absolute truth for film shouldn't be judged on its historical wins. But the fact that we can look at this 45 years later and we can see it won that best soundtrack score, which is 100% should have won. And this won editing, best sound, and was nominated for best film. Lost to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which isn't, a bad film to lose to. Other historical films like Star Wars losing to Annie Hall, you get some awful ones, but not in this case. It's amazing that we can look at a film like this, and this kind of, I know it's sort of similar to what I said a minute ago, but it was commercially successful beyond belief. It was critical acclaim successful. It was popular with audiences and the award ceremonies as well. But very rarely do you get a film now that can take on all 4 fronts. be that humongous blockbuster that can then get the other stuff that comes with it, or you might get the awards and stuff, but no one goes and sees it. It's a testament to, I think, Spielberg's creation. Maybe it's also a critique of modern filmmaking that now more than ever there are films designed to be nominated for, I wouldn't say designed to be nominated for Oscars, but studios will green light films to be nominated for Oscars. That's probably the fairest term, I would say. Not the directors or the people involved in them, but you know, again, looking at a film's legacy, Jaws it has some like no other. The fact is, you've got Jaws posters, both of you. You've got a T-shirt. It is fundamentally one of the most popular films. I think when you get like Japanese film posters, I think the Japanese Jaws poster is available to buy on Blu-ray in the UK. Like that's how big this film has. This is legacy, and yeah, sort of. If I'm talking about that kind of stuff, if anyone wants to chime in on the Oscars or box office, I don't have too much to add. But I just wanted to bring it because looking over Spielberg's career, this is one of those fundamental ones where this isn't going to be the first time as oh sorry he doesn't get shunned for best director nomination.
The
Well,
Oscars is a weird one.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The Oscars is a weird one because you've seen it this year with Dune. It was pretty much nominated for every single award apart from Best Picture and didn't have any acting awards either. For me, I would have nominated Rebecca Ferguson. I thought she was fantastic, but Villeneuve not being nominated for Best Director on a movie that got pretty much nominated for absolutely everything, it's pretty much the same with what Jaws was. There is no way you can look at Jaws and think that Steven Spielberg should not have been nominated and won for Best Director. And then the movie itself not winning Best Picture. I love One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson's best performance in my eyes. But it just doesn't compare to Jaws in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think the Oscars have changed to this day. Yeah. And I don't think they are gonna change. The horror genre has never been given enough respect by the Oscars. And there were some seriously bad decisions made regarding awards for this movie. And in relation to the box office, 100%, it was a box office smash. And if this movie came out today, it would probably be the highest grossing movie of all time.
Yeah, the Oscars, I mean, come on, 2008, The Dark Knight stuff, like they have a long history of ignoring not just like blockbusters, because I don't feel the need that like every blockbuster needs to have Oscars thrown at it, but like there's certain artistic examples that are so important and influential that how you ignore them is just kind of gobsmacking. Like Star Wars didn't win Best Picture either, and you can argue which one has the longer influence between it and Annie Hall, but Jaws is a case where there's just so many elements. I'm willing to look past the Best Picture. Like, did it deserve it? Yeah, but that's a great year. Dog Day Afternoon was also nominated. There's a few other, I think, was that Network? I think also that year. Like, 75 was a really tough year. Actually, I think Network was the next year, but nonetheless, really tough competition that year. It's like the Robert Shaw nomination is the one that kills me. I am very happy Verna Fields got the Oscar for editing. I think that's hugely important. But Robert Shaw's the one that I go, I think if they had a do-over, that one would be remedied. And Spielberg director, I've often wondered if that was a little bit of ageism, where he was in his 20s and they said, look, he did something great, but let's hang on and see what he does next. And it would be, quite a while. He didn't get a best director till Schindler's List. So that was like, 15 years later.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up, actually. I'm glad you brought the ageism stuff, because what scares me about this film, not pun intended, when you look at Spielberg's career, he is so young. And, I think you always get directors that come through. I remember Gareth Edwards did a really good speech at an event I was at, because he directed Rogue One, because his hometown was like 20 minutes from mine. And he did a big charity event at a local theatre, and he was doing a Q&A, and they're asking about, film king. And he's like, well, I'd write down my favorite director's debut age for their first film. And he's like, and then you see Spielberg and you're all there like, no, I'm just going to pretend I didn't see that name and go get someone else that's older. And it's really interesting seeing that, because I think you're right. I think that is and it's very typical, that content in the Academy, so many awards it's not based on what the film you've just done. It's congratulations for the last 10, 20 years, blah, blah, blah. And it's so frustrating as somebody that loves the industry, because you get so many actors' performances, directors, that get shunned. And then when they win their Oscar, it's very rarely their career best film that they win it for. And it also then robs somebody else of the chance of having the Oscar they deserve the film for. And Oscars a whole of a conversation piece. And obviously we've seen someone's legacy Oscar this year being in a very awkward reaction after. But yeah, Reece, the Denis Villeneuve stuff as well is just absolutely bonkers. And what annoys me now is, because we've had Lord of the Rings, sorry to get into this sort of dynamic, it's like, oh no, Dune, you can wait till part 2, or if you want to do a third one, we'll give you the pat on the back when it's all done and you'll sweep. And now we're going to get Nolan versus Denis Villeneuve in 2024. So I'm not looking forward to seeing two of my favorite directors up against each other, one for Oppenheimer, one for Dune. And yeah, so the whole Academy stuff is insane. But certainly with Spielberg, I think he did this incredible interview in the 90s, pre-shun as this, where he actually spoke being really grieved about not being nominated for Color Purple. And I think that film got 11 nominations, not including director, similar to Denis Villeneuve on Dune. How can you be nominated for everything and then not actually be nominated for director is what boggles many minds. But yeah, the Robert Shaw stuff, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think easily in a supporting role as well, there could have been a nomination there. And I think, as we could say, look at this film down the line, it's easy to sort of see the stuff like that, but this film has that long-standing legacy. And I think because it is a film sort of designed in a different way, is a horror, as you said, which they're not going to get the acclaim other films will, because it's not a deep character dive. This is about a shark killing people. It just gets unfairly sort of shunned to the side. What I want to kind of speak, because we're slowly wrapping up now, before we get to final thoughts, we spoke about some fantastic scenes today, almost all the big ones. I want to ask anybody if there's any scene we've not spoke about you'd love to bring up, or if you can list your favorite scene from the film. I mentioned the Robert Shaw monologue. I know Reece has as well, but if there's a scene anyone wants to bring up, anything that terrified them, if not spoken about yet, I'd be curious to know.
No, my favorite scene is 100% the one with sorry, apart from the speech scene, is the one with Delilah. I think that was definitely one which is stuck in my mind forever. But there's a few smaller things, like when the little kid cuts his finger coming in from the outside and you see the blood. There's no wasted scenes in this movie. Every single scene has a purpose to push along the plot or character development. And I think that's why it flows so well as well, because there's just no filler in any single scene. And you could pluck out so many scenes from this movie as being your favorite, and I wouldn't be able to have a debate about why I don't think that's a great scene, because I think every single scene in the movie has a lasting impact.
Yeah, I agree 100% there, because like if you ask me the best, you're going to say Indianapolis, or one of the shark attack scenes, which are incredible. But like, I even think of the dinner scene where it's Brody Hooper and, Brody's wife there, Ellen, and just like how funny that scene is, how kind of poignant it is, and the emotional, issues that Brody is going through in that moment. It's all just so wonderfully character driven and written in a way that really pays attention to each of the performers. And like, there's so many scenes like that. The one where they're doing the autopsy on the shark, the way that Brody's drunk at that point, and with Hooper. So it's kind of like, it's a movie that if you want those kind of big flashy moments, it's filled with them. Ben Gardner's head popping out of the hull of the boat is horrifying. But even just like the character scenes, watching Hooper bicker with the mayor is a ton of fun. So it's kind of one of those perfect movies where you've just got endless great scenes. And I want to also just highlight, we haven't touched on it at all, but the sense of place this movie has. Just scenes of like Brody walking to an art shop, the way they set up Amity as a very, very real movie place. You don't have a lot of films that really achieve that level of just atmosphere in terms of their environment.
I think as well with that, the thing that works this for me, many, it's not a flashy city, it's not LA, it's not any of this. This is the whole purpose is we need to see that, and I think they've spoke about this in the years that followed. You've got to be able to see that this is a town that needs that money, that needs the people going there. And certainly, I think maybe over here in England we get places like that where you can tell they're relying on that summer season, like those sort of like piers and beaches, all that kind of stuff. They need the sun to come out to get the people in, and it's a really fascinating concept because based off that, you then understand the mayor's decisions. But it's the mess that follows, and I think Cameron sort of nailed on that scene. You've got to set up the environment to also then set up the shark and the other things. Uh, there's some really good scenes within that, and yeah, I think you both. I don't think there's a bad scene in this film. I don't think there's even an average scene in this film. As you mentioned, the dinner scene when he tells his son just kiss me, like he just wants, because he knows what is at stake. And then later on down the line, you've got the whole concept is the kid in the water, and it is just incredible how they can just zip zap around and just get you on the edge of your seat at any given moment. And I think that's something very few directors can do. But if we're going to start wrapping this up, getting to our final thoughts. It's not hard to guess how this conversation is going to go, given the sort of last hour and 20 minutes, which has been a delight chatting with you both. To me, as I said, I'm terrified of this film, still terrified of this film, still going to get PTSD over Robert Shaw's death, I'm not going to lie. But I'm so kind of not happy at myself for watching it, so that sounds pathetic, but I'm so buzzing that I've actually been able to sit through it start to finish. I did have to pause it a couple of times for other things, but seeing this today again, the second ever time, first time I guess since being into film, that's 10 years sort of, you can't help but chuck the word masterpiece around, and it's a used word so much for so many films that shouldn't have that. I've probably done the same as a joke, but this is truly a masterpiece, a cinematic classic that will be with us till the end of time, that will be on the list for everybody to watch when they're trying to get into film. And it is right up there with Steven Spielberg, right at the top of his work with a few other films around it.
Yeah, for me, yeah, no, 100%. It masterpiece does get thrown around a lot, and I'm one of the main culprits for that. But for me, a masterpiece is a movie that I just wouldn't change a single aspect, a single shot. There is nothing about Jaws, from the opening credits to the final scene where they're coming out of the water in the distance, that I would change with this movie. It is my second favorite horror movie of all time, behind Alien. And it's I know it's a completely different movie to Alien, but the build up of tension in the two is very apparent, and the constant threat of the antagonist, the shark or the alien in the movie, is just there throughout. And Jaws will forever be one of my favorite films, hence the poster behind. And is by far one of my most watched movies of all time. And every single time I watch it, it's kind of like a new experience. I kind of pick up on smaller things. Once you've seen a movie over 15, 20 times, you're just noticing the smallest things that they're doing with the camera shots, the cinematography, the lighting in parts. And as I've grown to become a film fan and know a little bit more about the actual craft itself, it's just such a remarkably well-made film, and will 100% stand the test of time. And in 100 years, there'll still be people talking about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, Jaws has its spot in the history books, being the first real blockbuster. Its legacy is very assured, especially being Spielberg's first major work. So for that, I mean, its fate is sealed as one of the all-time greats. But I think, as you both have said, it's kind of a perfect film. And Spielberg may not agree with that. He may find things he would quibble about regarding the movie, but when I look at his work, there's very few movies he's made that are at least to me, seem as perfect as Jaws, where it is this perfect engine of just entertainment. And it is the movie I've watched the most in my life. I continue to watch it over and over again. I've never gotten tired of it. And, as Reece said, there's little moments you just spot. But I just, bought the 4K last year, and I was watching it with my sister, who's also a huge Jaws fan. And there's like a point where someone hits their head on a sign in the hallway of the town hall. And I was like, I've never noticed that before. And it's just like there's all these little, very real moments just buried within this very simple story. And it's like Star Wars in that way, where Star Wars, the story of it is very basic, but why do people keep rewatching it over and over? It's because it never loses any of its compelling, just force of nature when you watch it. Every time you're just completely sucked in and just it just drives right through. It's just an incredibly, satisfying film experience. And they tend to show it here in Vancouver every 4th of July. I try to go every year. I'll continue to. The one regret I have is we often have films they'll screen with an orchestra here doing the live score. I've gotten to see Jaws, Raiders, E.T., a number of films like that. They have yet to do Jaws. So my life story will be complete, when I see Jaws with a live score. But until then, it still does offer me something I haven't yet achieved.
No, that's amazing. That'd be quite terrifying listening to it up front, but I'd love to see them playing it like, when they get in sync at concerts like that as well, when they're doing the Jaws, that'd be incredible. But no, this is going to round out our Jaws review. Honestly, this has been like, to me, therapy. Talking about this film and some certain fears. So I hope everybody at home, please do, as I said, comment your thoughts on Jaws. Anything we've missed off the premiere of this video, we'll reply to in the comments that do follow. So please do that. So this is the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. There's a lot more films on the way. Is this his best film? That's going to be a question we'll be asking many a time across the year. But it's also one that's going to have different answers from different people. So please do hit that subscribe, and a lot more stuff coming on the way. But I'm going to hand over to both of you to speak about where we can find you up to. Reece, I'll start with you. I've got your Twitter and YouTube here. Tell a little bit about your channel and what people can expect.
Yeah, so basically I run a YouTube channel where primarily it's movie reviews. Because of some of the lockdowns and stuff, there was a fair few top 10 lists and other videos where I was reviewing some of my favorite movies. I think there's a Jaws review there somewhere. And that's primarily what I'm into, focusing more on the movie reviews and trying to keep people up to date. And then also active on Twitter, where I'm probably most active, to be perfectly honest. I'm on there on a daily basis, replying to everyone who comments. As long as I can see the comments, even if it's idiotic comments, I'll still reply. It doesn't bother me too much. And all my handles are at Rio's Positive POV, including my Letterboxd account. All of them are exactly the same.
Everyone follow Reece on Twitter. That's not an understatement. I've followed you for quite a while. I think the first time we followed each other was off the back of talking about Jaws. I actually think it might have been around that point. I think someone was tweeting saying that Jaws made them scared of sharks. I was like, same here. So yes, please do follow him on that and subscribe. And Cam, back on the channel, not talking about James Bond, but we are going to, of course, plug SpyHards for you and Scott. If people aren't familiar with SpyHards, what can you tell them about it? Not that the name gives it away.
Yeah, it's a weekly podcast where we tackle a different spy movie, and we go through franchises. We go through older things like Hitchcock films. Really, if it's a spy film, we'll tackle it. And essentially, we're looking to create the ultimate list or pantheon of all-time great spy films. So whether it's just Scott and I, or we bring on a guest, we'll break down the movie over the course of an hour and determine whether it belongs on what we call the knock list, which is a tortured acronym for Need to See Official Classics of the SpyHards canon. So we do those weekly. We also often do interviews with filmmakers, whether it's directors, actors, writers. So we tend to do that. So we've had some people that have worked on James Bond films, like John Glenn, who directed a number of them. So you can check that out. Find us on social media at SpyHards, or just search SpyHards wherever you get your podcasts. We're out there.
Everybody, please do. It's been a pleasure to get you on again, as it always is. And just a few more things, obviously, with this. Do get us on our social medias: Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook, letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy. Sometimes there are films that we get reviews for that we can't say we're reviewing until the embargo is lifted and whatnot. So the best place to find out about videos is always Twitter. And for the Steven Spielberg retrospective, this isn't going away. Next up, we have Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's going to be Tuesday, the 19th of April. Maybe his biggest film to date that I am still yet to see. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. I've had it on Blu-ray on the shelf behind me for far too long. And for people that don't know much about Spielberg, or they think there's a lot of films or what is coming up, we now have a new list I'm going to bring up on the screen for you all at home. We have a coming soon section. So this is what you can expect over the next 4 Tuesdays. We've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1941, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. There's never going to be a stage where there's like 4 films on that no one's like, wow, these are bad. Instead, you get the complete opposite. They're like, oh my God, he did Raiders back to back with E.T. There's going to be so many discussions like so. If you're a fan of Spielberg, this is the place to stick around for. Again, it's been amazing chatting with you both. Like, for getting you on this, I really appreciate you for taking time out to do this and for speaking about Jaws. As I said, it's a film that's terrorized me for many years and slightly at ease, but still scared. So thank you all for coming on. Thank you all at home for watching as well, and see us next week. Take care.